Hello, you're listening to the Superpower You podcast. This is episode 41. Our guest today is singer-songwriter Dana LaCroix.
I had a picture of somebody I could see in this world with me. Not too uneasy, too tired to play, or too hard to please. A kind of a lifeline.
Welcome to the Superpower You podcast, where we reveal the mental models and tactical skills needed to activate your inner superhero. And here's your host, Lisa Betts-LaCroix.
Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the Superpower You podcast. I am going to jump right in today to my podcast recommendation section, and it's a special one. I met this amazing podcast host at Podcast Movement in Philadelphia earlier this year. And the second I met him, I knew that we were like two birds of a feather in terms of values and intent and how we want to show up in the world to make a difference. Not to mention the fact that one of the first things we talked about was superpowers. I had the incredible fortune to be a guest on his show, which launched today. And I have to tell you that while I've done many interviews, Lou Diamond of the Thrive Loud podcast has a true gift as a host. He is the kind of interviewer I aspire to be. Someone whose presence you can't help but bloom in. Someone who celebrates the unique gifts of his guests with incredible enthusiasm. So what a blast it was to be in a conversation with Lou. If you want to learn more about me or how the Superpower You podcast came to be, then have a listen to the Thrive Loud episode number 185. I will, of course, link to it in the show notes. I'll also be going back to listen to all of Lou's back catalog now that I know just how good he is. He will also be a guest on my show on October 4th when we'll go deep into Lou's superpower, making connections. So stay tuned for that and make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss it or any of the other amazing interviews I have coming up. Our guest today is a Canadian-born, New York-based singer-songwriter, recording artist, touring musician, and stellar workshop leader. She's released 5 roots and blues influenced studio albums, and as a touring musician since 1993, she's played venues across the United States, Canada, Norway, and Denmark. She's appeared on national media outlets including CBC's Morningside, This Morning, Morning Edition, and The Artie Lang Show. She also happens to be my baby sister, and I could not be more proud or more excited to have her joining me on the show today for this very special and quite unusual episode. Welcome to the Superpower You podcast, Dana LaCroix.
Thank you.
Is it Dana LaCroix or Dana LaCroix these days?
It is Dana LaCroix. I have been using Dana LaCroix ever since I lived in Ottawa, right over the bridge from Hull, Quebec. And when I moved there, I was using, as you know, when we were growing up, we always said LaCroix, right?
Yep.
And there was a woman in the store one time, and she was asking my name for some reason or other, and I said Dana LaCroix, and she looked down her nose at me, and she said, "Oh, you mean LaCroix?" And I kind of put my tail between my legs and said, "Yes." It was very humiliating.
I remember when we were graduating from grade 8, and because you skipped a grade, we were called up to the stage to get our diplomas one after the other. And I guess you would have been first since your name's D and mine's L. At that time, we were saying our names differently. And I can't remember who at that point was saying LaCroix and who was saying LaCroix, but I remember that.
I was saying LaCroix and you were saying LaCroix. I seem to remember it was Mr. Fick who was reading it, and he got a kick out of it, and everybody started to laugh.
Yeah. Generally, I start my conversations with people asking them to share something about their childhood that informed who they've become today. So I'm wondering if there's something that comes to mind for you.
Well, I mean, one of my earliest memories and one of my strongest memories of childhood was how when we were kids, there was always, music in the house. We had the piano, and we used to all stand around the piano singing in harmony when we could. And then when we were going to bed, I always loved how Dad would come in with his guitar, and instead of telling stories, he would sing songs. It was all those old ballads, the really vivid story songs like the Ballad of John Henry and Winkin' and Blinkin' and Nod, that Hush Little Baby song. You'll still be the sweetest little baby in time.
Yeah.
Don't say a word. Yeah, yeah. And I always thought that that was just what people did until when we started going to school, and then we would have friends over and they would be, wow, you guys sing at home? And I'm like, yeah, don't you? And they said, no. So I remember at one point realizing how special it was. And even then as a kid, being really, really grateful that we had it because, I mean, it was one of the best parts of our childhood that I can remember.
It was so central. We had all those different generations.
Central, totally.
So many people coming together at parties and events that we had over the years, and all of Dad's friends and Mom's friends who were musicians, and then all of your friends from both the East End, and then when you went to Humber College to study music, all your musician friends, and then my performing friends and theater and music friends all coming together. And it was pretty amazing.
That's also something that was really special, that we were lucky to have, the fact that Mom and Dad's friends and your friends and my friends, three really, really different groups of people, got to know each other and spent time together and had parties together and listened to music together and sang together. Again, most people don't have that. You know, not a lot of people have their friends socializing with their parents' friends when they're teenagers. And it's really fun for me to see that these people now have all known each other for, 40 years or more.
Yeah.
That was really, really special. And also, I think something that very much informed my life and how I decided to live it and the person that I became. I'm sure it's very similar for you.
In terms of community and people and social interactions, how do you mean?
In terms of community, in terms of how people interact, that there aren't separate groups of people that stay separate, but that people can intermingle. And I think that that's become definitely a central part of my life in the way that I've lived it, and probably informs my music more than I know.
And then how about your trajectory towards music and being a musician? I don't think it's something you particularly thought of or planned when you were a child, right? How did that come about?
No, I always loved it. I always wanted to sing, and I always wanted to be on stage. I used to sing in high school at assemblies and stuff like that. But I was actually a very conservative kid. I didn't think that one could go and become a professional musician. One should go to university and get a career. And I never really considered it as a viable option until, interestingly, one night, and I remember it really clearly, talking to Mom and Dad about it and saying, yeah, you know, I'd love to learn to write songs and perform as a musician, but you can't make a living doing that. And I remember them both saying, well, you know, if you work hard and if you're sensible about it and practical about it, there's no reason you can't make a living as a musician. You might not be rich and famous, but if you work hard, you can find a way to pay the rent. And I remember a little light bulb going off in my head. Really? Can you really? And that stuck with me. And that was, I think, what really made me take the steps to have the courage to decide that this was something I really wanted to embrace.
That's interesting because Dad, when he was a musician as a young adult, had the exact opposite experience where his father basically said, oh, what are you, you're a clown? You're a musician, you're a performer, you're a clown. So
that's right. Grandpa used to say musicians were clowns, circus performers. Yeah, I think that was important to them to get that message across to us. Because, of course, Mom had the same thing as well. You know, being Japanese-Canadian not too long after the war, well, being interned during the war, and then the things that she had to put up with after the war. I think she was also very much told she wanted to be a doctor. She became a nurse because she was told, right, women don't become doctors. You are Japanese Canadian, so, you know, maybe there's no room for you here. So I think that was really important for both Mom and Dad to really encourage us to go ahead and try whatever we wanted to try.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm struck by the idea and the message that if you work hard and you practice, that you can do whatever you want. To me, it looks like you have a very regimented practicing process, and you practice regularly, you practice your vocals, you practice your guitar, and you have for many, many years. So do you think that's one of the sort of secrets of your career and your process as an artist?
I mean, being in the arts is such a difficult thing that you really can't survive emotionally, never mind financially, if you don't really love what you're doing. And I found that as I grew older and as I got more and more skilled and got better practice habits, the better I got at my craft, the more I loved it. And the more I understood how much I didn't know. Like when I was 17, man, I was the cat's ass, you know. And now that I'm 52 and I'm so much more seasoned and informed a musician than I was then, I can see how it's just this never-ending journey, and I've just taken a few little steps along the way. So I think discipline and working hard really are connected more to taking the first step, to saying, I am going to actually get out of bed. I am actually going to pick up my instrument. But once you're rolling, it's not so much hard work as it is an exciting journey. And as far as becoming a really skilled musician, I mean, I work hard, but I don't work nearly as hard as I mean, I've been around people who are actually capable of practicing 8 and 10 hours a day. I mean, I was never like that. I do my hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours. So in answer to your question, no, I don't think I'm particularly hardworking. But I will say that my process throughout life has always been to take very consistent baby steps. Like, I remember one time after summer vacation, one of the guitar players when we were in college, he came back and he had spent the whole summer woodshedding, and he came back, he was at a whole different level than he was in April when we left school. That's just not how I function. You know, I'll take a little baby step here and a little bit the next day, a little bit the next day, but I just keep going. And so slowly, I've learned my craft. But hardworking, I don't know.
It's like the Kaizen approach, consistent long-term improvement in baby steps.
Is that what Kaizen means?
That's what Kaizen means. It means improvement through the process and culture.
I knew it meant improvement. I just didn't know about the baby steps.
Yeah, definitely central to it is that you don't try to revolutionize change or improvement, that you do it consistently and in small steps. Yeah. I'm struck by the process of art, and the deeper that you go into an art form and the more mature you become, the more you realize how much you don't know. Maybe talk a little bit about how you manage your practice and creative time, both as a performer in terms of practicing, but also in terms of as a writer.
Well, they're two very different processes for me. Practicing is, Michael Brecker, a famous jazz saxophone player, once said that you should always practice so that it sounds good. You know, you shouldn't just, you should, always think about phrasing and musicality, even when you're doing scales. I've tried to take that to heart. I find it difficult. I tend to go into a rote kind of way of practicing, but it's something, again, that I've been working on throughout the years. But when I practice my instruments or my voice, I'm focused a lot more on a linear process, if you understand what I mean.
More.
I know what I need to practice, and I practice it. First I'll do this, and then I'll do this. I'll practice a scale, and then I'll practice some technique, and then I'll work on phrasing, then I'll get up my metronome. And it's all very easy to line up and move from one thing to the next. Songwriting
is very prescribed. Is that what you mean? You have to do X, Y, and Z.
Yes. And it's very vast. So you can't practice everything in every direction. So I can prescribe it myself. I can say, this is what I'm going to work on. With songwriting, it's a very, very different process for me because it's a very unconscious process. And it's a trick. It's like a balancing act because you have to be able to access the subconscious ideas, which for me are really where the magic lies. You have to be able to structure them without destroying them. So it's a little bit difficult to explain, but I can sort of give you a picture if maybe that will help. When I write, I'll come up with ideas and phrases and lines, and they'll just come out of the blue oftentimes. Well, most times the good ones come out of the blue, and I'll write them down wherever I am, on a piece of paper or on a napkin or in an envelope or whatever you happen to have there, and I'll collect them. In fact, there was one song that I wrote that I'm thinking of specifically now because the line came to me with such strength and clarity, and it was just one little line, and then I had to build it from there. It's a song called Northern Summer Nights. And living down in the States, it's not that far south from Canada, but it's still not Canada. And I remember one time I was driving home up the driveway. I was living out in the country, and the stars were incredible. It was this big, beautiful sky. It was a hot, humid summer night. And all of a sudden I thought to myself, I really miss those northern summer nights. Because it made me think of when we were kids, when we were teenagers, going up north, on the weekend with a case of beer and building a bonfire with all your buddies from school. And it was a thing going up north. It's just, that's not something that you can do in the United States.
Yeah, actually, I guess in Canada, since we all live along the border, it's probably a thing in general. It's one of those Canadianisms that come up of, hey, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going up north. How about you?
Yeah, but I think there's also a real mystique to it because in the States, you can say, I'm going up north. Well, maybe you're going to wind up in Philadelphia if you go up north. Right. Whereas in Canada, if you go up north, you could ostensibly just keep on going and you'd wind up where? What, in the Arctic Circle? To me, there's a real mystery and mystique and romance about the whole idea of heading north. I'm going to head north. Maybe I'll never stop. Even if you only go 3 hours out of Toronto, you're still going up north. And maybe you just won't stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even if you do stop, you may see some amazing moose and hear loons at night over the lake.
And the power lines stop. If you go, you keep going north, the power lines stop.
Yeah, it's so different. I remember going camping for the first few times I did in the States. And I know you can get away from civilization in the States too, but not as easily and as quickly as you can in Canada. There is such a feeling of wildness as soon as you go any degree north in Canada.
Yeah, and there isn't that same vastness that there is north of Toronto. It's just this, a vast wilderness and then almost a wasteland. Anyway, so I had that line, I miss the northern summer nights. And just that line and that moment was so clear for me and so vivid. And so my job then was to express what I was thinking about. So I sat down and I just kind of jammed on all the things we used to do. We used to go up north with a 2-4 of beer. And in a 2-4, that's also something that your American listeners won't understand. Because in Canada, we don't buy 12 beers, we buy 24 beers. So,
and then call them a 2-4.
And then call it a 2-4. So, I was just writing all these different verses about, skinny dipping, all the experiences that we had when we were teenagers hanging out up north, and had to kind of make it flow and make it make sense. And there's always this juggling between trying to be in the zone and in an inspired moment where things come to you in a way that is, I guess poetic is the word I'm looking for. But at the same time, there's a structure that works.
And that song, you really wanted that nostalgic aspect too, which it really has.
Yes, it had to have the nostalgia. But when I got it finished, the chorus was nice and I liked the verses, but the structure, it didn't go anywhere. It just sat there. And I didn't want to change the chorus because it was simple and I didn't want to go in and poke about at it and manipulate it because I thought that would ruin it. But I could hear that, structurally speaking, it was sitting all in one place. So I changed the key of the chorus. I modulated up a minor third, and bam, that made it work. So that's the balance between being creative and being structural.
So a lot of times when I interview people about their creative processes, we can't really have an illustration. But in this case, can we play a part of that?
Absolutely, by all means.
Hey, do you remember up in Ballard late in the summertime? We drove up every weekend, me and a case of beer and them good old friends of mine. Looking back now, there was nothing like it. The feeling of leaving the city behind. We always said we could stay that way, but then everything changed. Northern summer nights in our northern paradise, it seems just like yesterday. Northern summer nights, we were young and wild. Baby, do you still remember me that way?
I'm always fascinated by the experience of someone in their own creative process. And actually, this is pretty metaphorical. I'm interested in how we be individuals in the world and how we interact with other people, and then how we balance those things, right? In terms of relationship, in terms of partnership, in terms of dance. But let's talk about it in terms of your creative process around writing songs and producing them. And you started out alone, and over the years, your husband, Jakob, has gotten a lot more involved, not only in your performing career, but also in your recording and in the production of your music. So talk a little bit about how that came about, how that works, and what's the picture of that?
Honestly, we've been working together for so long, it's a little bit difficult to remember how it started. I mean, he was a drummer. He did a lot of jazz and Latin drumming. And I was working as a professional musician, but by which I mean I was playing gigs and singing what people needed me to sing, whether it was for weddings or for a Motown review. And then we moved to Denmark for a while, and I decided to start writing songs. Now, I was 26 at this point when I first decided I wanted to try writing. So I went through that process for a few years, and it took me a long time to build my confidence. And he was actually the first one who said to me, I was very hesitant about playing my song for him. I said, I wrote this little song. And he was the first one to say to me, wow, that's a really good song. And I said, is it? He said, yeah.
Which song was it?
It was Lonesome Angel, which was back when I was first started writing. I was writing more in the country vein. And I guess he got excited about the music, and it was at that point that we started working together. And it was interesting because we realized that our skills sets were very different.
3 hours to kill till the sunrise, and life's left that look in your eyes. You sit at the bar with a thundering heart, like a sign of old age in disguise. western wind in your smile. I think you're just shy 'cause you won't catch my eye, but I'm bound to be yours for a while. Lonesome angel, don't be downhearted.
He's an amazing arranger and producer. He's got that executive function where he can hear how things need to be put together. I one time came to him with a song called Cinderella's Sister, which is on my Moving On Looking Back record. And I had these, strummy, folky guitar chords, but I was hearing a rock tune. And I played it for him and I sang it for him. Cinderella's sister, I got loaded at the ball with his guitar going ching-a-ling-a-ling. And the first thing he came up with was this kick and bass line that totally made the song. Doo-doo, boo-doo, doo-doo, 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 and then these long chords that sat over top of them. And I would never have thought of that.
She's a beauty queen, a perfect little lady. She got eyes of emerald green, lips like cherry wine. Poor little thing, she's helpless as a baby. He's gonna save her with a ring, and I wish that he was mine. But I'm Cinderella's sister, I got loaded at the ball. He didn't save no dance for me. I'm Cinderella's sister, and I never win, that's all. This fairy tale don't do a thing for me.
It's been a lot of fun putting those two elements together because he is not a songwriter. He really has tried to write songs. It's not in his skill set, and I just don't understand arrangement the way he does. So it's been
That's
a
amazing.
really interesting process. Yeah, it's been great and an interesting, exciting, learning, creative process. It's a great thing to do with your partner, to have something in common where you're actually sharing in a creative process, but without stepping on each other's feet. If we both were arrangers, it might be a little difficult. It might not. I don't know. Working together is always a challenge, but it's been really rewarding and a really exciting journey.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop. That's the thing. As a musician, there's really not any end. As a songwriter.
Right. What about your voice? Doesn't your voice?
Well, your voice is a muscle, and sooner or later it starts to get croaky. But I have a plan. When my voice starts to get croaky, I'm going to move to Paris, and I'm going to sing cabaret songs and start smoking Virginia Slims with long gloves. Like, I'm going to do a Marlene Dietrich. So I'm covered. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got it all worked out.
Recently, you've been doing a lot of touring, and you toured with Peter, Paul, and Mary, right?
Yes, Peter Yarrow. I didn't tour with him. I did a show with him. I organized and was featured at a show together with him for a really exciting organization called Better Angels.
Yeah, talk about that.
We played at a convention. Better Angels is an amazing organization. I found out, it was kind of serendipitous, actually. I was listening to NPR, I guess maybe just before the 2016 election, when, you were really, really starting to get a sense of how polarized people really were. And I guess it was just after the election I heard the piece. In any case, there was this group of people that decided to get together and have conservatives, specifically Trump supporters and liberals, together in a room talking. And it was so antithetical to what people were feeling after that election. Here in the States, there was so much animosity and, those damn conservatives and those damn liberals. And it was when the war really started, if you will. Mm-hmm. At the time, it seemed groundbreaking to get Trump supporters, people who were passionate about Donald Trump, in a room having dinner and conversation with liberals who couldn't bear the thought of the man. So I followed the organization, and then I found there's a conference, a psychotherapy conference that I perform at and give workshops at every spring in March. It's called the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium. And the following March, I was at the symposium, and one of the keynote speakers, who's been there for a number of years, who I know quite well, William Doherty, was talking about this Better Angels group, and he apparently was one of the founding members. And so he has been volunteering his time to mediate these workshops between conservatives and liberals.
Wow.
Throughout the whole country. And I mean, their membership has grown in the last year and a half, 2 years. It's just been explosive. And Peter Yarrow, of course, was one of the founding members. That's the kind of thing he really believes in as well. So yeah, I did a workshop here in the Binghamton, Ithaca area. I got 8 conservatives and 8 liberals and sat down, and Bill came, and David Blankenhorn, who's the head of the organization, and we talked and we learned, and it was so fabulous,
Wow. That does seem groundbreaking. That seems so needed right now, and because things have gotten so polarized politically.
I think it's really needed. Because
How did it go?
How did it go? You mean that particular workshop?
Yeah.
Well, it was great. We sat in this room together, and we were instructed, taught, and coached in how to communicate without arguing. Keep in mind, it was run by a family therapist, which to me is really interesting and makes a lot of sense. It wasn't, you think this, and you think that, and you're this, and you're that. It was, I think this. And I believe this, and I feel this. For example, one of the exercises was a group of liberals had to sit down and write a bunch of prejudices that we felt conservatives had about liberals. And then conservatives had to do the same. And then we had to explain why those preconceived notions were not true. And then there was another exercise where we had to ask them all the questions we wanted to ask. Why don't you believe in global warming? And why, on and on and on. I'm not going to get into specifics, but you know what I mean. And then they would, as a group, a group of conservatives, they would discuss the questions. They would come up with answers that they all felt comfortable with. They would have a spokesperson who would then stand up at the bulletin board and give us the answers, and we were not allowed to respond. Zip it and listen. And that alone was a fabulous exercise, because how often do we do that? Mm-hmm. Sit and listen to points of view that we don't agree with and don't really want to hear, but we just sit and take a breath and listen. And it was beautiful. And to me, the interesting thing, and the very, very encouraging thing for me, was when I left that workshop, I don't think anybody's mind had changed. Everybody still had the same opinions, I think, that they came with. But I found that of the 15 people, 16 people that were there, the people who I actually liked the most were 2 or 3 of the conservatives, just as people.
So you took out their belief systems from your evaluation of them as human beings.
Yeah, and I dug them. I thought they were fun. I thought they were nice, and the fact that I didn't agree with them shrunk. It just didn't matter. Whereas if I had encountered them on Twitter or Facebook, it would have been everything, So it's a fabulous organization.
I'll put links in the show notes.
Please.
So people can find out more about it, because this is happening all over the country, right?
It is. And I think you should actually try to maybe do an interview with David Blankenhorn, the founder. He's an interesting guy.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that I really appreciate is that you do use your music and your ability as a performer to support organizations and activities that you believe in. Like you mentioned, the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium, which was awesome because I got to go this year and see you perform for everyone, but also meet all those incredible people that you've been working with for so many years. And another thing that you do with your music that is making change and making a difference is working with the children in Binghamton. Talk a little bit about that.
That has been a real passion and labor of love since I moved to this city. Binghamton's an interesting city. It's on its way up. It was a manufacturing city for many years, and of course IBM was here, and then everything went down the toilet when they left. And a lot of the families who live in Binghamton are low-income people from New York City who might be on social assistance or might have low-paying jobs or, low-skilled, they do low-skilled work. And it's just so much cheaper to live in Binghamton. And there's a direct bus line that goes right from New York City to Binghamton. So there are a lot of transplanted families from the city who have a really hard time making ends meet. And consequently, there are a lot of neighborhoods where the kids just don't have the financial and sometimes even the family resources to give them a fair shot, quite frankly. So I first started getting involved when I was volunteering for their school garden. There's a fabulous school on the north side, and they have a garden, and I got together with some other kids I work with in a more affluent city, and we wrote a song together called The Garden Groove, and we raised money for the garden in Binghamton. So that was my introduction to the community about 4 years ago, I guess, when we first moved here. And that grew into a project called the Binghamton Children's Choir, which is a choir that I started about a year ago. It's such an exciting project. It's a community choir. Participation is free for any child who lives in the greater Binghamton area. The goal of the choir, apart from obviously, giving children the chance to get together and sing, was also to get kids from different backgrounds and different neighborhoods and different cultures together in one room to do something creative and positive and to take what they're doing out into the community and allow them to have an impact with the music that they've learned. And it is such a blast. I mean, we do songs like Iko Iko and flip-flop and fly, and James Taylor, shower the people. Whatever we feel like doing, we do. And the kids are between the ages of 7 and 12. And then we go out and we play at the local festivals, and the kids sing, and they get up on stage, and they feel like they're contributing something, and they are. So it's so much fun. I just love it.
One of those gifts that you just have in spades, and you always have, is this ability to bring people into music and to have them feel excited and like they can be participating in a way that's meaningful. And I saw you do that at the Washington concert in the lobby. But also you do the sip and sing thing. Like, you have a theory, it seems to me, that all people should and can sing, and you have the ability to draw that out of them, it seems to me.
I appreciate your saying that. And again, Lisa, I think it harkens back to the way we were raised. When we were standing around the piano singing, there was never, okay, let's see who's good and who's not. It was everybody just raised their voices and shouted it out. And it was so joyful. I mean, like I say, it's my most vivid, happy memories of childhood. And I guess I've carried that into my work. The workshop that I do in DC at the conference is called the Singer Within. And it's just basically a recreational singing class for people who love to sing. And I find it's interesting. I find so many of the people that come to this class in other workshops that I've done as well love to sing and are afraid to sing.
Yes.
That's the combination.
Yep.
They love it and they're scared of it. And to me, it is just the biggest high to be able to go in and make people feel comfortable and confident in just lifting their voices and saying, hey, here I am, I'm going to sing this. And I get such a high from doing that. And it just creates this, it makes people more themselves. It makes them more human somehow. When people sing together and allow each other to sing together, they access a kind of humanity that isn't always as present as we'd like it to be. Anyway, we ended that course by coming out into the lobby and doing a flash mob. So I had them, broken up into different groups, and I started singing, and then the second group started singing. And then we came together and finished with a jam session in the lobby of the hotel just as the rest of the classes were getting out. So that was what you saw.
Yeah, and the joy on those people's faces is exactly what you're talking about. It was obviously people who are not singers,
Yep.
who were nurtured into experience of you can sing and let's do this together. And the joy on their faces when they were singing in that lobby was just amazing. It was so cool.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
They look like children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of workshop, I can imagine that being the perfect kind of workshop. I loved how the Psychotherapy Network or Symposium people had a creativity day, because creativity is so important. It doesn't matter whether you're doing something in medical science or you're doing something in cryptography, or no matter what you're doing. I think to get people who are together for a purpose, to have some time to create something together through a process like your workshop is an incredible gift.
Well, I think it's important, as you say, in any field, because in the fields of sciences and mathematics, in business, you've got people all have their creative juices, and it can be really intimidating to come forth with your voice. And, I had this idea, I had this thought, and it's personal, and if it's creative, it's probably not something anybody else has said before, and it can be frightening. And I think that the physicality of singing can give you the experience of a physical and an emotional experience of, hey, I did it. I brought my voice out. I dared. And I think that can transfer into any kind of work. And creativity is absolutely important in any job, in any realm where you see people who are successful and happy. They're using their creativity.
So true. Okay, well, there's a bunch of themes I'm seeing here. And one of the things I always have to do in my interviews with people is talk about superpowers. And the context I always give is that a superpower is that skill set that's always been with you, no matter what part of your career, what kind of work you've been doing. And one of my guests described it as that skill set that is so natural to you, it's like swimming in water, but to other people, it looks like you're climbing a vertical slope. And so as a result, people don't necessarily always know what theirs is because they think everyone else has it too. So with that context, do you have any sense of your superpower?
I have been thinking about it because, following your podcast and, reading some of the comments, you had put that question out online, I think on Facebook at some point. And I've been thinking about it and honestly think that if I have a superpower or something that's been constant to me throughout my life, it's been my ability to learn, my willingness to learn. I'm pretty teachable. And I think that it's definitely a gift that I'm grateful for, because I think if you are afraid to learn, the first thing is if you want to learn, you have to admit that you don't know. And I think I'm pretty good at that.
Do you find that shows up in your teaching too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because when I teach, whether I'm working with children or adults or professionals or amateurs, the only way to really communicate effectively with someone that you're trying to lead or coach is to be very in tune with them. And if I come in with a preconceived idea of what they need to learn, I can't hear them. So when I go in to teach a group of people, the first thing I need to do is learn about them. And so I go in a learning frame of mind. Who are these people? Who is this singer? What is it that's blocking her? How is she fearful? What does this kid have inside that he is trying to get out, but he's a little shy about it? And then you listen for, oh, he's really good at rhythm. He can't really sing. He's having a hard time finding the notes, but he's got a killing sense of rhythm. And then you have to find out how to talk to them to give them confidence. So I think it definitely informs my teaching.
Yeah, so I want to expand on that because I get that you're a learner and that informs how you grow. But I think the piece is related to that, but I think it's bigger. Because the theme that I see over and over and over again, from the beginning of our conversation to the end, to all the things that you do in your life, is a nurturing music and that life force in other people. So maybe you use your ability to learn and to be aware of other people as one of the skill sets that allows you to access your real superpower, which is to be able to communicate to them, music's in you and it's yours too.
That's interesting. When you frame it like that, I think you're probably right. That's definitely what gives me joy, is helping people find a space where they can be as much themselves as they can be.
You might need that skill set as a learner, or that openness, I think, that it implies to access that superpower. But I think the superpower itself is more along those lines.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way, but it rings a bell definitely when you say it.
It just seems like the theme that comes up over and over again is there's something about the connection between music, using music to connect people or using music to free people.
That's eloquent, using music to connect people. That's definitely my passion. Whether or not it's my superpower, I don't know, but it's definitely, that makes me light up.
Yeah, I think it is your superpower. I don't know people that
Interesting.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
Like I say, it shows up everywhere. It doesn't matter. You're performing on the stage in front of Psychotherapy Network and everyone is happy and excited and clapping and connected. And you're an example of someone who performs for the purpose of the connection with the people and not about from an ego. And I think that comes across really clearly.
Wow, that's very exciting for me to hear, because it's always very difficult, I think, to analyze yourself or to see something about yourself. But that definitely makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
That's good. I think it's true. I don't say things just to have people feel warm and fuzzy.
No, I know that. No, I know you don't. But it's definitely it has a sense of clarity to it that definitely speaks to me.
Cool. So you're going to be performing pretty soon in our hometown. I'm going to be there.
Oh, I can't wait.
It's going to be super fun. So talk a bit about that concert's there, how people who are hearing this and who are local to Toronto might be able to come out and see us and see you perform. And then also just how people can reach you and follow you.
The performance in Toronto is Saturday, September 29th, and it's an early show. It's 2 sets. I start at 6 p.m. and I'm done at 8. It's at a place called 120 Diner, which is at 120 Church Street in downtown Toronto. So it's a cocktail hour, have some dinner, I'm going to do a couple of solo sets. It looks like a nice venue. I've never played there before, but it looks like a really terrific place. So that is Saturday, September 29th. I'll be going up to Picton in Prince Edward County on Sunday to play a show at the Acoustic Grill on the 30th. And as far as getting in touch with me in general, Facebook /Dana LaCroix Band or just Dana LaCroix. And my website, of course, is danalacroix.com, which brings me to another challenging point in my career, which is that my name is really hard to spell. Which is not a problem on the Superpower You podcast because your name is the same as mine.
Right. And also I'll have links to everything in the show notes so people can find those there. Also, if people want to donate to the Binghamton Children's Choir, that's a possibility. I'll put links to that also, right?
I'd really appreciate that. That would be great.
Well, thank you so much for being with me on the show, Dana. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks, and I appreciate you, and I love you.
It's been a thrill and a pleasure, and I'm so knocked out by what you're doing with your podcast. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Love you too.
John Henry had a little woman. Her name was Polly Ann. John Henry took sick, Lord, he had to go to bed. Polly Ann drove steel like a man, Lord, Lord. polyandro still like a man. They say polyandro still like a man, Lord, Lord. Polyandro still like a man. Well, John Henry drove steel in the mountains until his hammer caught on fire. Well, he drove so hard he broke his poor heart. He laid down his hammer and he died, Lord, Lord. He laid down his hammer and he died. They say he laid down his hammer and he died, Lord, Lord. Laid down his hammer and he died.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with my baby sister, Dana LaCroix. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I know your time is precious, and I am greatly appreciative of every second you spend here with me. Please do subscribe to the show, and if there's something you found useful about this episode or any other episode, please forward it on to other people. Your reviews, recommendations, and forwards of the show are the way that we gain a bigger audience and makes it easier for us to reach more people, to make a difference, to make sure that we're all out there living in an incredible way, utilizing our superpowers and celebrating the superpowers of our friends, loved ones, and anyone we come into contact with. So until next week, have an incredible day.
Thank you for listening to the Super Power You podcast. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes and get more information at lisabl.com.